I was halfway through drafting an operation summary, eyes squinting at the spreadsheet when the door to my cabin creaked, a soft knock. Hesitant, almost like the person on the other side wasn't sure they belonged here. I looked up, and there he was. Ray, my boss's son. It wasn't his first visit. I'd seen him in passing over the past few weeks. His return from abroad meant he now shadowed different departments, but it was the first time he stepped into my space. And for a moment, everything paused, like the cursor on my screen, blinking, waiting for a command I wasn't ready to give. He was wearing a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled neatly at the elbows, and a leather strap watch that peeked out every time he moved his wrist. Hair a little tousled, like he hadn't fully combed it, like maybe he didn't care, or maybe he did, but wanted it to seem like he didn't. He gave me that small polite smile people wear when they know their surname precedes them. Hi, I'm supposed to learn about departmental workflows. Thought I'd start here. Unless you're too busy? I should have said yes. I should have redirected him politely or asked him to schedule something through HR. But instead, I heard myself say, "Have a seat." He smiled, slightly relieved, slightly amused. Dan sat across from me, a little too casual, one leg slung over the other, like this was a living room, not an office. That's when I noticed it. His eyes didn't just look around the room, they studied, landed on me too often, a glance that lingered just a half-second longer than it should. Most people his age were quick, jittery, always on their phones. Ray, he was quiet, watching, and something about that made the space between us feel thinner. I shifted in my chair, cleared my throat. "So, you want to understand how we manage the monthly reconciliation reports?" "Sure," he said, shrugging. "Mostly I just want to understand how people here work, the rhythm, the quiet stuff you can't read in manuals." That line stuck with me. The quiet stuff you can't read in manuals. It felt like a mirror held to the very thing I'd been ignoring, the restlessness I'd carried. Lately, I was good at my job, respected, but I was numb, safe in routine, invisible beneath numbers and deadlines. Ray disturbed that. Not loudly, not rudely, but in a way I couldn't ignore. He asked smart questions, genuinely listened when I answered. He had that easy charm of someone raised to fill a room without crowding it. But now and then, I caught the edge of something else, a glance too curious, a question a little too personal, like when he asked, "Do you like working here? Or is it just a place to be?" I looked at him, straight on, his head tilted, eyes locked with mine. I couldn't answer immediately, not because I didn't have one, but because the question made something shift inside me. I told him the truth. Some days, it feels like I'm waiting for something I can't name. He didn't smile or nod, in that typical polite way. He just said, softly, "Maybe it's not a thing you're waiting for." The room felt warmer after that, not physically, something else. When he left, he thanked me for the time, but his eyes stayed a moment longer, watching me like he wasn't finished. That night, I replayed it all, his glances, the lean in his chair, the way his voice softened at the end, and a question, unspoken, pressed at the back of my mind. What if he wasn't just observing? What if he was searching for something, too, and maybe he found it here, in my cabin, in me? Whatever it was, it had started, quietly, naturally. Just like that knock I almost didn't hear. The next time Ray showed up at my door, he didn't knock. He just stepped in with a grin, like he belonged there, holding two paper cups from the cafe downstairs. I guessed, 1 sugar, no cream. Am I wrong? I wasn't a coffee guy until that moment. I took the cup anyway. "You're learning fast," I said. "Comes with the territory." "Observing, adapting," he said, then sank into the chair across from me like it was his second home. From that day on, it became a pattern. Sometimes, he had a reason to drop by, workflow questions, project updates, scheduling. Other times, he didn't bother pretending. He'd slide into my office between meetings, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just himself, full of offbeat questions like, "If you had to live in one movie forever, what would it be? Or what was your dream job before this place killed it?" I'd roll my eyes, pretend to be annoyed, but I was never too busy to answer. And the truth, I liked him being there. There was something about the way he leaned back in his chair, foot tapping a silent beat, watching me talk like I was saying more than I meant to. We started falling into a rhythm, unspoken but familiar, the kind where you start a sentence and the other person already knows where it's going. One afternoon, I caught him studying the photo on my desk. It was old me and my brother, sitting on a crumbling seaside wall, feet dangling over the rocks. "This you?" he asked. I nodded. Back when life meant digging holes in the sand and chasing kites. Ray tilted his head, You looked lighter back then. That comment landed heavier than I expected. I turned to face my screen, hiding the flicker in my expression. But he didn't apologize. He didn't have to. He was right. Our connection was built in silences just as much as in words. One evening, during a long power outage, the office floor emptied early. I was staying back to finish some reports when he popped in, holding a flashlight and a box of pastries. Place feels like a haunted museum, he said, placing the box on my desk. Figured we could ghost watch together. We sat by the window, the city blinking in faint shadows beyond the glass, eating cinnamon rolls in the quiet. He told me about how hard it was coming back, how he didn't quite fit in anymore, even in his own father's company. That's why I like being here, he added. You don't expect me to be someone. I looked at him then, really looked. His face was calm, but his eyes flicked to mine, then away, and I realized I liked being the place where he could be unguarded. The next week, there was a day trip, scheduled, a mandatory retreat for the leadership team and department heads. Ray tagged along, unofficially. We were assigned the same SUV for the 4-hour drive. I tried to keep things light, professional, but he kept shifting the balance. I brought snacks, but I forgot I'm allergic to 3 of them, he said, tossing a trail mix pack toward me. You can be my taste tester / savior. I smirked. So I die first. That's comforting. Hey, I didn't say I was a good planner. By the 2nd hour, the AC broke. The dessert heat pressed against the glass. I pulled over at a gas station to stretch. He got out too, wiping his forehead with the back of his arm, shirt clinging slightly to his back. This trip better be worth it, he muttered, eyes closed as he leaned against the car, breathing deep. Something about the way he stood there, loose, exposed to the sun, almost vulnerable, stayed with me. Back in the car, the windows down, the music playing low. There were moments I caught him watching me between turns, not staring, just observing, like he was mapping something unspoken. I kept both hands on the wheel. I didn't look back, but I felt it, every glance, every quiet shift in air. Then, as we neared the cabin lodge, the real mishap hit. A pipe had burst earlier that morning. Half the rooms were closed for repair. They shuffled everyone around, and somehow, I ended up sharing a 2-bed room with Ray. I can sleep on the floor, he offered, a little too quickly, or the couch in the lounge. Doesn't bother me. You're not sleeping on the floor, I said, already setting my bag on one of the beds. We're both adults. It's one night. Ray grinned. See, I knew you'd say that. That night, in the dim cabin room with just the low hum of a ceiling fan and the distant croak of crickets, we lay on separate beds, too far to touch, too close to ignore. He asked, quietly, did today feel different to you? I didn't answer right away, because yes, it did. The morning after the retreat began with sunlight bleeding through wooden blinds, and the sound of Ray's breathing, even and soft in the other bed. I hadn't slept much. I'd spent most of the night watching shadows shift across the ceiling, and listening for any stir from his side of the room. There was something dangerous about how easy it felt sharing space with him, like a ritual we didn't talk about, but both of us understood. By noon, the schedule had gone sideways. The retreat coordinator announced that the team building hike would be replaced with a site visit to a partner facility about 30 minutes out. Most of the department took the shuttle. Ray and I, running late after grabbing coffee from a roadside cafe, took the SUV again, I swear, he said as he slid into the passenger seat. We're making more road memories than actual work ones. I laughed, despite myself. That's because you keep turning everything into a road trip. Maybe I like being stuck with you, he said, smirking, before buckling his seatbelt. I froze for just a second because there was no teasing edge in his voice that time. It was playful, sure, but there was something else layered beneath it, something I didn't want to name. The sky shifted as we drove, blue streaked with clouds. About 10 minutes out from the site, the SUV sputtered. I glanced at the dashboard. The gas light blinked twice before the engine stuttered. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, pulling us over onto a wide gravel shoulder. Ray leaned forward, peering at the gauge. Seriously? How low was it? I thought we had more. I rubbed a hand over my face. This day just keeps giving. He chuckled, unbothered. Well, it's not a real adventure until we get stranded somewhere. I got out. Popped the hood, instinct more than logic, but there was nothing visibly wrong beyond what I already knew. We weren't moving until someone brought gas. I pulled out my phone, barely a bar of signal. Ray stood beside me, arms folded, shoulder just brushing mine. I felt it. Even that brief contact sent something crawling up my spine. "Wanna sit in the back until they send someone?" he asked, nodding toward the rear seat. "Sun's brutal out here." I hesitated but agreed. Anything was better than standing in the heat. We got in the back. Doors cracked open for air, and it felt smaller than it had yesterday, more intimate. We weren't speaking much, just sitting, both leaning back, shoulders nearly aligned, his knee a breath away from mine. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small portable speaker. Music, sure. He played something low and slow, an acoustic song I didn't recognize. The kind of music you feel more than hear. The cabin filled with it, soft chords curling into the air between us. Ray looked over. "You always this quiet?" "Only when I don't trust myself to speak," I replied before I could think better of it. His brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't press. Instead, he shifted, turning slightly to face me more fully. "You're different when we're alone," he said. "How so?" "Softer, not in a bad way. Just like you stop bracing for something." That struck me in a way I wasn't ready for. I looked away, out the window. "That's because it's easier when no one's watching." He didn't answer right away, but then, gently, "So who are you hiding from?" I exhaled through my nose. "I think sometimes myself." We fell into silence again, a weighted one, but not uncomfortable. And then he laughed, quiet, like he wasn't sure if he should. "What?" "I was just thinking about that first day I came into your cabin," he said. "You barely looked at me, like I was a checklist." "You were," I said. "But then you kept showing up." He smiled. "You didn't stop me." "No, I didn't." He didn't say anything after that, just looked at me, long and calm. And then, in one quiet motion, he reached over and picked a piece of lint from my shirt. That touch, it wasn't anything, not really, just his fingers grazing my chest. But it felt like being seen naked. I swallowed, trying to keep my breath steady. His hand lingered a second longer than necessary. Then he withdrew it. "Sorry," he murmured. "Habit." "What kind of habit?" His lips curved slightly. Getting too close, he leaned back again. But it was too late. The air between us had changed. I looked down at his hand resting beside him, inches from mine. I could have touched him, just reached out. But I didn't, because if I did, it wouldn't be nothing anymore. And I wasn't sure what I could handle changing. We waited like that for another 20 minutes. Close, quiet, a fragile thread between us, stretched but unbroken. When the support vehicle finally arrived, we slid apart like nothing had happened. But I felt it. Something had cracked open between us and that stranded car. And I couldn't tell if I was terrified of it, or ready to fall right through. That night, after we returned from the site visit, I found myself standing under the flickering porch light of the retreat cabin, staring out at the pine trees that rose like silhouettes against the dusky sky. The air had cooled, a breeze drifting through, stirring my shirt against my skin. Most of the staff were gathered in the main lodge, nursing drinks and telling stories. But I needed quiet, I needed air. Footsteps approached behind me. I didn't turn. I already knew it was him. "You always disappear when there's music," Ray said softly, his voice half laugh, half curious. "I like silence better," I murmured. "It doesn't pretend to be something it's not." He moved beside me, just close enough for the edge of his sleeve to brush mine. We both watched the trees for a moment, saying nothing. A moth danced around the porch light above us. Somewhere, someone cheered inside, probably over a card game or a joke I would have laughed at on any other day. "You've been quiet all day," Ray said finally. "Since the car." I nodded. "Yeah. Want to talk about it?" "Not really." He let out a quiet breath. "You know, I'm not good at pretending things didn't happen. I'm aware." He turned to face me then, and I could feel the weight of his eyes. "So let's not." I looked at him, really looked, the way the light caught the curve of his cheek, the faint shadow beneath his jawline, the seriousness. In his gaze gone was the teasing tone, the playful energy. This was Ray, stripped down, still, waiting. "You keep pushing," I said, voice low. He shrugged. "You keep holding back. You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." There it was, the moment I'd been circling for days, maybe longer. I looked away, ran a hand through my hair, then turned my body to face him fully. "I don't know what this is," I said. "I don't know if you're just being kind, or if this is some game you play when you're bored, or if maybe you flirt with everyone because it's easier than being honest. But I can't be another maybe for someone who has options. I've lived that already." Ray blinked, surprised not by my words, but by how fast they came, how raw they landed. "I'm not playing with you," he said quietly. "You're my boss's son." I whispered, not with anger, but fear. "You walk into rooms and everyone adjusts. I've worked years to be invisible enough to keep my job, my space, my peace. Then you showed up. And suddenly I'm second-guessing everything, how I look, how I speak, whether I smile too much when you talk to me. He stepped closer, the wooden boards creaking under his feet. Do you want me to stop? I didn't answer. Ray tilted his head, eyes narrowing just slightly like he was trying to read something hidden behind my face. Because if you do, I will. That offer, said, with such painful softness, was worse than if he'd argued. I shook my head slowly. I don't want you to stop. Something in his expression broke just a fraction. The walls between us, paper thin now, started to dissolve. Then why are you scared? He asked. Because wanting something doesn't make it safe. He nodded, slowly. And not wanting it doesn't make it go away. The porch light buzzed above us, casting a golden halo that trembled with the wingbeat of a moth. In that glow, Ray took one step closer, and I felt my breath catch. He said, I've been trying to figure you out since the first day I walked into your cabin. You looked like someone who had mastered quiet, who wore silence like armor. But I kept coming back because I saw how you looked at me when you thought I wasn't looking. My heart thudded in my chest, loud, unapologetic. You did. Yeah, he said, smiling softly, like I was something that scared you and pulled you in all at once. I swallowed hard. You're not wrong. I've never felt that before, he whispered. Not like this, not with someone who makes me feel safe and nervous in the same breath. I laughed short and breathless. That's a dangerous combination. It's the honest one. For a moment, we just stood there, words laid bare, hearts thudding in sync. And then he reached for me, slowly, gently, his hand brushing against mine, fingers curling around it like a question. I didn't pull away. My hand stayed where it was, held in his like it had been waiting to be found. Ray's voice was barely audible. I don't know what happens after this, but I'd like to find out. I looked down at our hands, then back up at him. Me too, I said. He stepped in close, and I let him. Let that warmth spread through the space between us until it disappeared. His other hand lifted, brushing the side of my face, thumb grazing the corner of my jaw like he was memorizing the feel of me. And then he kissed me. Not fast, not greedy, just honest. Like he wanted to be sure I was still there the moment his lips touched mine. I was. The kiss was quiet, tentative. The kind that didn't need anything else around it, not words, not music, not time. When we pulled apart, I didn't speak, neither did he. We didn't need to. Everything had changed, and somehow, nothing had. We walked back inside the cabin, still quiet, hands brushing now and then, until finally, mine found his again and didn't let go. The cabin felt different after that night, warmer, quieter in a way that invited closeness instead of avoiding it. There was no big speech afterward. No dramatic unpacking of feelings, just a shared glance and a faint smile when we both woke up the next morning, still in our own beds. But something between us unmistakably changed. Ray was the first to speak. Did we kiss last night? Or was that just an unusually vivid dream? I turned to look at him, his hair a little wild, his eyes crinkling with mischief. If it was a dream, we both had the same one. He grinned. That's comforting. I'd hate to think I imagined it and kissed the air like a lunatic. I laughed, sitting up. No air kissing involved. It was real. It was. I paused, searching for the right word. Unexpected, but not wrong. No, he said softly, not wrong. The conversation drifted naturally after that. We packed up our things and went down to breakfast with the others. But the way we moved around each other had shifted. I noticed it in the subtle way his shoulder brushed mine when he passed behind me, or how his eyes found mine across the dining room during small talk with the rest of the team. There was no awkwardness, only a quiet sense of shared understanding. That afternoon, we were assigned to the same cleanup crew for the final retreat event, folding chairs and carrying gear back to storage. It was mundane work, but even that felt different now. I handed him a folded tablecloth and our fingers touched just briefly, but he didn't pull away. Neither did I. He tilted his head toward me. So, are we pretending this is just nothing? I smirked. You're really bad at pretending. Remember, fair, he said. Then let's not. Later, we ended up by the lake, where most of the team had scattered in small groups. He and I walked along the shoreline, skipping stones and kicking loose gravel beneath our shoes. The breeze off the water lifted the edge of his shirt, and his arm brushed mine again. But this time, when I looked at him, he was already looking at me. I don't want this to be a retreat thing, he said. It's not, I said, but it's also not simple. I know, he replied. I'm the boss's kid. You work under his management. There's probably 1,000 reasons not to do this. Exactly, I said. And yet, he reached down, picked up a flat stone, and flung it into the water. It skipped once, twice, then sank, and yet, he repeated, glancing at me with a small smile. We sat on a weathered bench beneath an old tree. I could feel his knee close to mine again, the warmth of it radiating. But he didn't press, didn't rush. His voice was softer now. I don't know what this will look like when we get back, he said. I can't promise it'll be easy. I don't need it to be easy, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of it. I just need it to be real. He leaned his head back, closing his eyes, letting the sun spill across his face. You always say things like that. Like what? Like, you've been holding them in for a long time. I paused. Maybe I have. He turned his head toward me. So what now? I looked out over the water, then back at him. Now, we take it one moment at a time. We don't overthink it. We don't hide from it. He nodded, and we keep kissing. I laughed, occasionally. He leaned in then, close enough that I could see the freckle just beneath his eye. How about now? Now's good. I whispered. And we kissed again. This one slower, more certain. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask a question, it answers one. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. You know I'm going to make this complicated, he murmured. I know, I said. But I think we'll figure it out. He smiled. Then let's figure it out together. By the time the retreat ended and we packed up to leave, something between us had settled. Not into routine, no, not yet, but into something more honest, comfortable. We didn't need to explain it anymore, not to each other. On the drive back to the city, Ray dozed off in the passenger seat, his head tilted toward the window, sunlight sliding across his face. I kept glancing over, half to check on him, half because I still couldn't quite believe how easily he fit into my life, like he'd always been part of it, and I'd only just started noticing the space he'd already filled. When we hit the city limits, he stirred, rubbing his eyes. We home, almost, I said. You snore. By the way, he scoffed. I do not. You snorted at one point, like a cartoon pig. Lies, he muttered, sitting up straighter. You're making that up to distract me from the fact you kept glancing at me every 5 minutes. I grinned. You were dreaming. You don't know what I was doing. I wasn't dreaming, he said, then added softly. I was resting, in a space that felt safe, that shut me up, because I knew exactly what he meant. We stopped at a corner near his building. He looked at me, then down at his hand resting on his knee. You want to come up? I hesitated, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Things were fragile now, not in a breaking way, but in a precious way, like we just built something new, and it still needed gentleness. I have to check in at work, I said. Your dad's probably already halfway through tomorrow's schedule. He nodded slowly. Right, don't worry, I said. We'll handle it. Ray opened the door but didn't step out. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled something out, folded, worn at the edges, a postcard. It had a faded photo of the same lakeside we'd visited during the retreat. He turned it over, scrawled something on the back with a pen from my glove box, then handed it to me. On the back, in simple handwriting, it read, if this gets complicated, just meet me here. I'll wait. I looked up at him, speechless. It's not a test, he said quickly. It's a promise. For when life gets messy, because it will. But if you ever feel like you're drowning in it, you know where to find me. I turned the card over in my hands, the edges soft beneath my fingers. That's a big promise. Ray leaned in, kissed my cheek, then whispered, so don't make me wait too long. He climbed out, slung his bag over his shoulder, and gave me one last look through the window before heading inside. I drove off feeling like I'd just been handed a new beginning, in the form of a weathered postcard. The next morning, back at the office, everything looked the same. My chair, my desk, the mindless hum of conversations down the hall. But it felt different, because when I glanced up, Ray was standing outside my cabin again, this time with 2 coffees in hand, and this time, he didn't knock. He walked in, like he belonged, set the coffee on my desk, and leaned against the edge, eyes dancing. You forgot your postcard, I said, pulling it out from my desk drawer. I didn't forget, he said. It's yours now. I tucked it back into the drawer gently, like something valuable. Then I looked up at him, unsure how to frame the question forming on my tongue. So, US, he nodded, still figuring it out. But I'm in, if you are. I didn't say anything. I just reached across the desk and took his hand, quiet, easy, without needing to ask. We stayed like that for a few seconds, to coffee steaming, his hand in mine. No promises carved in stone, no perfect clarity, just something real, something beginning, and for once, that was enough.